The sharp scent of motor oil and steel filled the air. The hum of a distant machine echoed faintly, blending with the low rhythm of rain tapping against the garage roof. A soft groan escaped Emily Carter's lips as her eyelids fluttered open, her vision swimming through the haze of confusion. Her first thought was pain, a dull, heavy ache at the back of her head, followed by the terrifying realization that she had no idea where she was. The ceiling above her wasn't made of glass chandeliers or polished marble. It was metal, rusted around the edges, lit by a single flickering bulb. She blinked again, her breath hitching as she took in the sight before her. The hood of a car, a toolbox on the floor, the faint smell of gasoline. She tried to sit up, but her body trembled with weakness. The faint rustle of movement caught her attention, a small sound like the shuffle of sneakers against the concrete. Turning her head, Emily saw a little boy, no older than 5, sitting quietly on a worn-out leather sofa beside her. He was clutching a toy truck in one hand, his bright blue eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "You're awake," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily opened her mouth, but her throat was dry, her words lost in the fog of disorientation. Before she could ask anything, the heavy garage door creaked open. The sound of footsteps approached, slow, firm, deliberate. A tall man stepped into the warm glow of the overhead light. His face was tanned from the sun, his short hair slightly disheveled, his jeans stained from a long day's work. The sight of him made her tense instinctively. "You're safe," he said, his tone calm but steady. "You passed out on the side of the road last night. I brought you here." For a long second, Emily just stared at him. She wanted to ask how that happened, how she had gone from a glittering charity gala filled with champagne and laughter to a stranger's garage somewhere in the middle of nowhere. But her mind was too foggy to piece it together. The only thing she remembered was the flashing lights of her luxury car dashboard, the rain pounding against her windshield, and then nothing. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of good people still existing in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Hours later, after a sip of water and the warmth of a blanket draped over her shoulders, the memories began to return. Emily Carter, CEO of a multi-million-dollar design company, the woman whose name graced magazine covers, had fainted behind the wheel after skipping dinner, exhausted from endless meetings and photo ops. She'd been driving alone back from a fundraising event miles outside the city when she'd lost consciousness. The man, she learned, was Jack Reynolds, a mechanic and single father who owned the small garage attached to his modest home. The boy beside her was his son, Eli. As Jack worked quietly in the background, the rhythmic clink of his tools oddly soothing, Emily couldn't help but observe him. There was something grounded about the way he moved, something reassuring in his silence. He didn't pry or ask about her expensive dress, or why a woman like her had been driving alone so late. He simply went about his work, occasionally checking to make sure she was comfortable. Emily had spent her life surrounded by people who spoke in deals and deadlines where kindness was often transactional. Yet, in this humble garage, she found herself being cared for without a single expectation. It unsettled her, and somehow touched her deeply. As the rain eased outside, sunlight began to filter through the windows. Eli climbed onto the couch beside her, holding out a cookie. "Dad made breakfast," he said proudly. Emily smiled faintly, her heart softening. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it with trembling hands. It had been a long time since anyone had offered her something so simple, not a networking favor or a business advantage, but a small gesture of human warmth. Over the next few hours, Emily learned more about her unexpected savior. Jack had served in the army before returning home to raise his son alone after his wife passed away. He ran the garage by day and took online repair contracts by night just to keep the lights on. Despite his quiet life, there was a strength in him, a calm resilience that made her feel strangely safe. When she offered him money for helping her, Jack looked almost offended. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You needed help. That's all there is to it." His words echoed in her mind long after he said them. For someone used to a world where every act had a price, the purity of that sentence hit her like a wave. As the day went on, Her driver arrived with her car, which Jack had towed from the roadside earlier. She could have left immediately. Her assistant had called 3 times, her office was waiting, and her next meeting was in the city. But something in her hesitated. She wasn't ready to go, not yet. Not until she understood why this brief encounter felt like something she had been searching for her entire life. Emily found herself sitting by the garage door, watching Jack teach Eli how to tighten a bolt. The boy giggled when he dropped the wrench, and Jack ruffled his hair with a smile. There was laughter, real unguarded laughter, something Emily realized she hadn't heard in her own home for years. The sight stirred something in her chest, a warmth she couldn't quite name. As the afternoon sun melted into amber hues, Emily stood, brushing off her dress. "You've both done more for me than you know," she said softly. Jack just gave a small nod. "Take care of yourself, Miss Carter." She paused before stepping into her car. For some reason, hearing him call her that felt cold, distant. "Emily," she corrected gently. He smiled, the corner of his lips turning up. "Emily, then. Drive. Safe." As she drove back toward the city, her reflection in the mirror looked like someone else. Someone softer, someone humbled. Her life of corporate boardrooms and social galas suddenly felt hollow. Days passed, then weeks. But something about that garage, that child's innocent smile, and that man's quiet integrity refused to leave her thoughts. She began finding excuses to drive through that part of town again. Sometimes under the pretense of checking on her car, sometimes just to bring Eli a toy or drop off coffee for Jack. Each visit grew a little longer than the last. One evening, after a particularly draining business meeting, Emily found herself pulling up outside the garage once more. The sound of laughter spilled into the night. Jack and Eli sitting on the floor playing with a set of toy cars under the glow of a single overhead bulb. For a moment, Emily just stood there, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel, her eyes glistening with something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. Jack noticed her in the doorway and smiled. "Didn't expect to see you here this late." She shrugged lightly, stepping inside. "Maybe I just needed a little peace and quiet," she said. "This place has plenty of that." As the evening wore on, they shared coffee and quiet stories. Jack spoke of his late wife, of how he'd almost given up before deciding to build a small, simple life for his son. Emily told him, for the first time to anyone, how lonely success had felt, how every victory came with emptiness. They were 2 people from different worlds, bound by something far deeper than circumstance, gratitude, loss, and the strange grace of second chances. When she finally stood to leave, Eli ran up and hugged her leg. "Come back soon, Miss Emily," he said. The words hit her like a gentle ache. She smiled, promising she would. Weeks turned into months. Their worlds began to intertwine. Small visits became dinners, and soon Jack's garage wasn't just a place she visited, but a refuge from the noise of her life. The woman who once lived in penthouses now found herself kneeling beside a little boy, helping him paint old car parts just for fun. The millionaire who once measured her worth in profits now measured her days by laughter and shared meals. One afternoon, while Jack worked on a car, Emily sat nearby sipping coffee, her thoughts heavy with gratitude. She looked around at the dusty shelves, the smell of oil, the worn leather couch where she had first opened her eyes, and she realized how profoundly her life had changed. This was where she had been saved, not just from fainting, but from herself. When Jack approached, wiping grease from his hands, he asked quietly, "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't passed out that night?" Emily smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Every day. And every time I do, I thank whatever force made me stop on that road." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the mechanic, but the man who had given her something money never could. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps spread messages of kindness and hope to more people who need them. Special request: if you believe every act of kindness can change someone's life, even a stranger's, drop A in the comments to show your support for good hearts like Jack's. In the quiet that followed, Emily realized that sometimes life doesn't break you. It redirects you. She had spent years chasing everything she thought mattered, only to discover that the true richness of life could be found in a small garage, in the laughter of a little boy, and in the eyes of the man who once saved her life. And for the first time in years, Emily Carter, the woman who had everything, finally felt home.